They encrypt your data and sell you the keys, steal your data, and demand payment to not publish it. And now they're going to start swatting cancer patients. Time for a glass of OJ. We've had ransomware with us for a while now. And really until recently, ransomware has almost operated more on a moral basis than a criminal basis. When ransomware really got started, yes, it was definitely crime-based, but a lot of them were motivated not necessarily by greed so much as against greed. A lot of hacktivism came about to try and shut down enterprises that were doing things that they didn't find good for the ecosystems or political nature. And so that's kind of where ransomware really came about, was trying to deny companies the usage of their data or their systems. You might remember low orbit ion cannon, kind of one of the big first really ransomwares out there, from a standpoint of, we're going to point this at you. We're going to shut your network down because nobody can use it because we're just shoving so many packets at it. And we demand this payment to stop. And that went further. That concept went further into malware, into encrypting your data that's on your hard drives. And that just kept progressing more and more to where we see it as a criminal enterprise now. It's no longer a situation of, oh, we're going to go after banks, which, can afford $100 million loss or a $10 million loss, and just kind of write it off as kind of a bad day at the bank, a bad day at the stock market, even sweep it under the rug and try to do better next time. But more and more, they've been coming after places they originally would swear off, such as schools and hospitals and utilities, basically saying, we don't want to hurt the common person. We don't want to hurt poor people. We don't want to hurt children. We don't want to hurt people who are trying to seek medical care. We're just after the greedy capitalists that are harming us in our countries and our things. Again, born out of that hacktivist mindset. But they've moved on, either because they're finding it harder to actually extort those places. After all, a lot of places now are simply saying, nope, we're not going to pay. We're not going to give into your ransom demands. And more places are doing that. So they're moving on to other customers. After all, these criminal organizations are that, enterprises, organizations. They have a business model. They have financial officers. They have HR, recruiting. They have hiring and fire. They have layoffs. They have customer service. They have IT. They have everything you could think of that a business would have. They've got that very much in their business model. And so they've got to keep feeding that business model in order to stay afloat. And just like any other, they've become essentially the monster that they hated, in that they are becoming greedy capitalists themselves, not paying their workers a lot, and just the top echelon getting all the money, taking all the bonuses. Who knew? So we're no longer in that hacktivist mindset. We're now kind of in this criminal corporate underground that exists to take money from innocent people. And so basically everything we knew about ransomware 8 years ago, it's out the window. Those rules are gone, clearly. Case in point, last year, it's gotten so bad that there was a hospital that was sued by a cancer patient because they had ransomware. They were able to recover their systems and everything, but the data was stolen. They didn't pay the ransom demands, and the perpetrators ended up giving that information out. They ended up publishing what was medically appropriate photos, but they were photos in the nude nonetheless, and they were cancer patients, or a cancer patient. And this is part of a class. I haven't been able to follow up and figure out where that is, whether it's settled or what has happened with that case, civil case. But essentially they were saying, they were being negligent. They didn't have the security measures in place to protect them. And whether or not that's true, that'll be adjudicated in court or potentially settled. But again, it's not just the ransomware, the recovery time that gets you. Now you've got to deal with other repercussions that are starting to come into play. And definitely, it's going beyond customers just being angry that you had a ransomware attack. It can actually now have a direct impact against your customers. And not just, oh, my identity can be stolen, so I'm going to get some credit monitoring for a while. No, we're actually going to try to embarrass you. We're going to put you in the public spotlight. And it's getting worse than that. And we'll get to that. You've guessed by the title of the video, we're getting to that. Important to note that the causes for ransomware are still all the same. It's emails, it's drive-by downloads, even a USB drive I just found that I'm going to plug it into my laptop or computer at work. Yes, that still happens and it still works. Users may click, files execute, creds are dumped, the network is scanned, it's logged into, and malware is spread. And, criminals really aren't getting better at their job. They're kind of just sticking to the script. They're still doing the same thing over and over and over. It keeps working. It's just working with different sectors. It's working with banking as well as retail, as well as public utilities. And in fact, they're finding those places that have less budget for investing in IT and security practices, they're even easier. So they don't need to enhance. They don't need to go after the banks anymore and get better and better at their jobs. They can just take the same tactics and spread it to other people. They just kind of keep finding places that don't have even the basics in place, and they're successful at what they can get out of them. But what we're really finding is these new methods, this ratcheting up of pressure to cause damage and try then to use that threat of damage or the damage itself to extort companies and people and victims for money to stop them. We've even seen definitely the government has been weaponized. Regulators have been weaponized. We know that with the SEC suing the SolarWinds as well as their former CISO Timothy Brown, that is very much in the news, and criminals have taken note of that, and they have started filing SEC complaints against publicly traded companies saying, hey, we got in, we did all these things to their environment, we found these things materially lacking that caused this, and they may not have reported this breach to you, and they haven't disclosed this. So they've started doing those types of things. We've even seen them just simply throwing out the attack plan into the public to let everybody know, hey, here's how we got in, here's how bad it is, and you can get in too, inviting more people to go in. Again, the threats are not just towards getting your data back. It's potentially against other sensitive information being released, and even trying to get government to react in some way. We see releasing compromising information about customers, users, employees, third parties, embarrassing details. They're starting to not necessarily invest time in figuring out, how to breach things faster, but they're spending time on what data did we get? We got a lot of data here. What can we use to extort either the end victim, be a patient or a customer or employee, but the company as well. And we get to the title of this video, Swatting Cancer Patients. You can find a link to this from the Register down in the doobly-doo just last week, I believe, or about 10 days ago. The Register reported that there is a hospital that was just, or a healthcare facility that was just ransomed, and they didn't pay. And they said, well, we have a bunch of cancer patient information here. We have their date of birth, we have their identity, we have their mailing address. We could easily just start swatting these people. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with swatting, it's not something that's super brand new. It's been out for at least, I'd say 7 or so years, at least, fairly well published in the media. Essentially, what swatting is it's making use of SWAT teams, tactical teams in your local police departments and sheriff's departments. And essentially, what the goal of it would be is to get a response from that SWAT team to go to a location for the purposes of making them believe something is very dangerous going in there, be it a shooter, someone who's threatening to, cause lots of bodily harm, potentially a bomb threat. There could be a lot of different threats that they would respond to in a very quick and very violent manner. They're going to potentially knock down doors. They're potentially going to deploy flashbang. They're going to potentially even shoot people who they think are trying to either defend themselves or trying to repel their, force inward. And of course, they're looking for people to evacuate and get out. They're looking to identify who's actually going to cause harm. But sometimes, as we've seen with law enforcement, they're in that situation when you're in a headspace of, an active shooter or an active threat of bodily harm in this situation. Your situational awareness and your context and the methods you're prepared to use at that moment out the gate, very different than walking up to like a traffic stop or someone up on the street or someone at Walmart. It's very different. And so they're counting on there going to be a false arrest. They're counting on the fact that there's going to be something there. This has been used in the video game arena. That's kind of where it became popular. Someone was beating you on Fortnite or Destiny or Call of Duty is the classic one, and they would socially engineer, or they'd figure out maybe on a community, a forum, a Reddit, find your username and go and see, you're on this Discord server, or, oh, you're on Reddit here, and, oh, you gave enough information, or, oh, that's a picture of your house. I can OS it and figure out where your house is, and now I know your address, and now I'm going to spoof a phone number from that, area code, and I'm going to call your police department, and I'm going to call this in, and I'm going to cause someone to come in and potentially kill you, harm you, get you arrested, while they figure other things out. It can be quite effective in that, because there have been situations where police have unfortunately, killed someone. And unfortunately, swatters are very, very hard to find. And so sometimes what they've been able to do is they've been able to go and search logs in the person's game or chats and figure out who the suspect user may be, and then work both from the telecommunications to try and find where that phone call, to find an IP address of who logged in and used that particular phone number. If those places keep enough logs, a lot of them don't. And also from the game side, and try to get both of these data points connected to someone they can concretely say is, yep, we caught it from both sides. We know enough that we can say this person did it. And if it caused the death of somebody, that actually in many states gets you a murder charge. And you're probably going to go to prison for at least 30 years for that, if not life. So it's very serious. Unfortunately, a lot of our cyber criminals, at least from an American perspective, are not here in America. They are abroad in some places where there's no extradition treaties. And it's tough to actually get criminals extradited. Some of these situations may be different, and they go, okay, yeah, well, sure, we don't want that happening, so we're going to help, but you're not guaranteed that. So it's much, much harder. But again, this is not just an exploit of technology and systems, and even just kind of people within your company. This is an exploit of public safety and public safety response. And a lot of that's outside of your venue as a security professional. You don't get to control how police respond to things. You don't get to control how law enforcement is going to respond to a situation. So what's going to end up happening then, right? What's the next thing to really happen here? And I think if they end up doing this, and the threat of this may be enough to start triggering some conversations, policy changes, and some some heightened funding. But sometimes we all know, and unfortunately, people don't pay attention to things until the damage is done. We know that in security. We know that in public policy. We know that with streets. Until enough people have crashed and no longer live at that street intersection, that intersection doesn't see a change towards safer intersections. We see that all over the place. And this is probably not going to be too much different. But what I do foresee happening is, because these are international actors that are threatening bodily harm and threatening, tampering with law enforcement, it's possible that this goes beyond law enforcement and it starts going into places like Department of Homeland Security, NSA, CIA, some other places, because now you're starting, we've gone from hacktivism to, criminal enterprise. Now we're starting to get into the realm of terrorism, even though this isn't necessarily political based, which is usually a component of any decent definition of terrorism. We're starting to get into that kind of realm where people are attempting to cause physical harm to others outside of their country's boundaries. That's going to start warranting not domestic surveillance, but international surveillance. So we're possibly going to see some more investment there and more resources there. So that's a potential thing that could come about from this. And really, they're increasing their profile. Usually they stayed away from all these places to keep the low profile. Maybe the cops won't come after us if it's just banks. It's just going to be insurance payoffs and that kind of thing. Now that we're starting to get more and more impact, we're going to start seeing that law enforcement is starting to see the rise in this. We're going to start seeing more investment towards this. Enough people are going to say, look, we're tired of it. Leaders, let's do something about this. And someone will start taking notice. And this will be treated like not just an IT issue, but, a truly criminal mafia-like situation. I mean, this really is becoming like the mafia. Well, wouldn't it be a terrible thing if your patients in the cancer ward or your cancer patients, part of this study or part of this treatment program, all of a sudden we're met with law enforcement and guns and threat of arrests and all this. Wouldn't that be terrible, right? We're starting to get into mafia level activity really over this. Not just an extortion game, but true physical harm going to be done to people. And companies are going to have a really hard time with this, more so than usual. As technology has become more and more a part of our lives, we're just finding that the boundaries between our technology and our daily lives are thinning and thinning and thinning. Everything's becoming smart. Everything's starting to interact with us. You can do something online that has a direct impact on other people's lives, and this would definitely be one of them. So what happens online is happening IRL. And criminals, again, are responsible for their crimes. Even if you didn't have a lock on the front door of your house and a criminal comes in and steals your TV, helps themselves to your money, your valuables, whatever else they can get their hands on and go, it's still that criminal's fault. But you're still going to be saying to yourself, man, if I just had a lock, man, if I just had security systems, cameras that could have at least seen something that could help catch this and maybe recuperate. There are things we can do we talk about risk management, lessen our risk or increase our chances of being made whole after an incident, so to speak, and repairing the damage that was done to us. And so we need to realize that, even though the criminals are responsible for their crimes, there's still a responsibility with us because they're using us. They're using our organizations to essentially service these threats upon our customers, upon our employees. You think this stops at, patients at hospitals? What about employees? What about, leaders of the company? What about other customers? What about third parties? Sometimes you're just a means to your third party, and maybe you've got customers, they've got customers. There's all kinds of ways in which a criminal can make this very personal through your company very quickly. And you're going to have to figure out a way of how to deal with this and how to help your company deal with it. So what should you do? I mean, you're a cybersecurity person after all. You're not a hostage negotiator. You're not a public safety expert. How do you deal with this? And I think you got to go to your own experts. And that's going to be talking to your local police, making them aware of these types of situations and asking them, have they considered this? Have they seen swatters from video games before? And how do you deal with that? Have they ever seen extortion like this? Go and talk to your local FBI. The government is now starting to, in the United States, is now starting to invest a lot more in the cyber divisions. And I believe soon every FBI field office is going to have a cybersecurity agent specifically assigned to basically handle situations. Get to know your local FBI, get to know your local cybersecurity agent. Because they may be able to help you. And even if they don't have a game plan yet, you bringing this to their attention can help start collaborating on how to build a game plan on this. How do we respond so that we can, start taking actions as soon as the threat is made to figure out, okay, what do we do from here? And how can we stop a bad thing from happening, or even find those folks and get rid of them from society? You can also talk to the U.S. Secret Service. Believe it or not, they're not just dealing in counterfeits or protecting the president. They also are involved with a lot of things just regarding money in general. I mean, they work for the Treasury, so the cash and money is kind of their deal. So they actually do have a cyber crimes division, and you can talk to them and you can possibly get some ideas on how to handle this. You could probably talk to either the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, but a lot of states have their own departments of Homeland Security. I think almost everyone does now. You can probably talk to someone there, and there's probably a cyber security, but you can also say, hey, this potentially, threatens the Homeland Security for sure in the state you're in. Are you aware of this? How do we deal with it? How do we get you plugged in? When do we call you? What's the process? Get that prepared, add it to your incident response plan, at least as a supplemental, so that you know how to engage your law enforcement and your federal and local agencies. Check your insurance policies. Talk to legal. They're going to have their own situations about this. They're going to have opinions as to, from a legal perspective, what are you actually supposed to do? What are your contracts stating you should do? What do regulations say you should do? So a lot of things you do may be governed, limited by those perspectives. So bring this to your legal folks and say, what would you do in this situation? What would you advise? How do you deal with it? Tabletop it with them. Make this, if you have an annual tabletop, which I recommend you do, make this a component of the tabletop. If you're doing some kind of ransomware or extortion event, make this a part of it. Sure, you got your data back and everything, and you didn't pay the ransom, but now they're coming after this. What do you do? Because this is now starting to happen. How does it affect your public relations, right? So let's say you are a company that someone did something unmentionable with that customer database, and a horrific thing has been done. You're now the company, you're now the organization that allowed that to happen. Whether that's the truth, whether that's really the best way to characterize it or not, that is how the court of public opinion ends up dealing with these things. Is all they're going to know is someone got hacked and this person died, or this person was injured, or something else bad happened to this person. And so now that starts adding negative image to your public image, negative reputation. And so how do you deal with that? How do you get out in front of that? How do you help people? Can you help people? Another thing to think about is, do you have a legal responsibility to inform those who have been threatened? So let's say they have a database of 100 users that they said, we're going to start swatting. Do you have a responsibility to say, here's 100 users, or here's 100 people we know, we need to at least notify law enforcement who can notify them, or we need to notify them personally, warn them? How do you do that? That's probably something you haven't thought of before. How do you do that? Because it's not like any other cyber breach notification. We take your security very seriously. No, that's not going to cut it here. This is not a person's security anymore with their data. This is now, we take your life seriously, and that's just not going to come across in an email. So how do you deal with that? Again, you're not a hostage negotiator. You're not a lawyer. You're not a public relations expert. But a lot of times we as cybersecurity professionals have to be the people who bring these folks together and put into their minds conversations and topics that they wouldn't think about. It's a lot of times our job to think about the bad things that can happen here and communicate that as a risk, as a threat to the business, the organization, our people, our mission, and then helping brainstorm and come up with ideas and a way forward, even if we're not the ones who ultimately make the decision, helping to address that with the rest of the business. So a lot of this is just simply uncharted territory. But you have to get started somehow. There's so many things I'm sure that I'm missing here that in a couple of years, or maybe after the first couple instances of this happening, I hate to say and act like, this is unavoidable, but as with any incident, as with any breach, how you respond, we're going to learn it for the first time, unfortunately. That's how this is going to happen. And it's uncharted territory, but you have to get started somehow. And so I urge you all to take some of these suggestions to heart, to start these conversations and see how you would respond to this. And that's the only way to get started. But maybe you've already done some of that. Maybe you've already done some of the legwork and I've just not heard from you yet. I'd be very interested to see what your thoughts are. Have you talked to law enforcement? Have you talked to your lawyers? Have you talked to insurance companies? Have you talked to your Departments of Homeland Security? What have they said? Have they given you interesting ideas I haven't talked about here? Catch me on social media. Put some things down in the comments. Let's start a conversation. And I'll see you in the next one.